I say the same thing about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She has shown so much courage on this issue. I saw some people when I was coming here calling her names. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop the partisanship on this issue. This is an issue where they both have shown real courage and leadership, and I appreciate them joining us today.
I hope my colleagues are watching this press conference. I want them to think, what if this was your sister? What if this was your daughter? When these survivors speak, the Washington establishment is asking the American public to believe something that is not believable. They're asking you to believe that two individuals created hundreds of victims and they acted alone, and that the DOJ has no idea of who else might have been involved, that nobody else did anything that rose to a criminal enterprise. The American people know that's not true. I think it's shameful that this has been called a hoax. Hopefully today we can clear that up. This is not a hoax. This is real. There are real survivors. There are real victims to this criminal enterprise. And the perpetrators are being protected because they're rich and powerful and political donors to the establishment here in Washington, D.C.
It's grieved me to watch the arguments and debates take place among my colleagues and even the administration. I think this is something that was worth fighting for. You see, the women behind me are going to tell you stories that you've never heard before. These are unimaginable horrors that they've lived with for their entire lives since they were very, very young. But these are also similar stories that many children, teenagers, women, and even men are enduring nightmares right now as we speak. You see, these women have been fighting since the 1990s. I heard one woman tell us yesterday since 1996. And they have carried with them shame. But I want to tell you something. The shame does not fall on these brave, courageous women. The shame falls on every single person that coldly turned a blind eye to their abuse. The shame falls on every single person that enabled it. The shame falls on every single person that took money to continue it. And the shame falls on the people in power over the past several decades that protected the monster, Jeffrey Epstein, and his cabal that continued a nightmare. It's because Jeffrey Epstein somehow was able to walk among the most rich, powerful people, not only in America, but foreign countries. Yesterday, I heard countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, and even Israel, and other countries, the truth. The FBI, the DOJ, and the CIA holds the truth.
In 2008, Courtney Wild walked into my office because she was a part of a federal investigation into Jeffrey Epstein, where all she wanted was the government to talk to her. Little did she know the government had worked out a secret immunity deal for Jeffrey Epstein, and we had to file Jane Doe's versus United States of America to prove that Jeffrey Epstein worked out an illegal non-prosecution agreement with the government. We then filed civil lawsuits against Ghislaine Maxwell, which has resulted in her being in prison. Our civil lawsuits led to her prosecution. We filed lawsuits against Jeffrey Epstein, against his estate, and against two financial institutions, JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank, that proved that they knowingly provided the financial infrastructure for a sex trafficking operation. While we have seen the documents, you haven't. And when you see the documents, you're going to be appalled. And the American people deserve to see everything.
We aren't here just to ask for transparency, though. We're here too to ask for protection. The women here represent hundreds of other women who we have spoken to, many of whom were trafficked from other countries, from Eastern European countries where women don't have the rights that we have here.
For me, the turning point was when I had my daughter. And on the day she was born, I knew I had a responsibility to protect her and to protect all children. I have to use my voice, the voice that had been silenced by fear and shame for so many years. Make no mistake, my polished exterior is a shield hiding a wound that still bleeds. But through this wound, I have found purpose. To be part of lasting change in how we confront exploitation and abuse. And to be clear, the only motive for opposing this bill would be to conceal wrongdoing. You have a choice. Stand with the truth, or with the lies that have protected predators for decades. I am no longer weak. I am no longer powerless. And I'm no longer alone.
My name is Annie Farmer, and I was 16 years old when I was flown to New Mexico to spend a weekend with Epstein and Maxwell. That same year, 1996, my sister, Maria Farmer, reported what happened to me there, along with reporting her own assault at their hands and their theft of sensitive photos of herself, of me, and our younger sister that she had taken for her work as a figurative painter. I am now 46 years old. 30 years later, we still do not know why that report wasn't properly investigated, or why Epstein and his associates were allowed to harm hundreds, if not thousands, of other girls and young women. We have never been told whether those images were found when they discovered a large amount of child sexual abuse material on his property. For so many years, it felt like Epstein's criminal behavior was an open secret. Not only did many others participate in the abuse, it is clear that many were aware of his interest in girls and very young women and chose to look the other way because it benefited them to do so. They wanted access to his circle and his money. At a time with record high levels of distrust in our institutions and a perception that there are two Americas, one for those with power and privilege and one for everyone else, passing this Epstein transparency bill is one important step that can be taken to prove to Americans that the government does not side with sexual perpetrators.
My name is Marina Lacerda. I was minor victim 1 in federal indictment of Jeffrey Epstein in New York in 2019. I was one of dozens of girls that I personally know who were forced into Jeffrey's mansion on 9 East 71 Street in New York City when we were just kids. I was only 14 years old when I met Jeffrey. It was the summer of high school. I was working 3 jobs to try to support my mom and my sister when a friend of mine in the neighborhood told me that I could make $300 to give an older guy a massage. It went from a dream job to the worst nightmare. Jeffrey assistant Leslie Groff would call me and tell me that I needed to be at the house so often that I ended up dropping out of high school before 9th grade. And I never went back. From 14 to 17 years old, I went and worked for Jeffrey instead of receiving an education. I will never forget when the FBI agent showed up in my door in 2008. Jeffrey Epstein hired a lawyer to represent me, or more like to represent him, I'd like to say. I couldn't ask any questions, and I had no idea what was going on. I was terrified. Until today, I think most of us are still terrified. I thought somebody was going to kill me. I thought something was going to happen to my sister or my mother. It went further out to even maybe thinking something would happen in Brazil with my family. Why was I never called to testify then? We could have saved so many women. We could have saved so many lives from being abused. Why did he get away with it in 2008? Why was he able to go on in the abuse with hundreds of girls after the Florida investigation? Why didn't they let me testify to help stop him? Our government could have saved so many women, but Jeffrey Epstein was too important and those women didn't matter.
Hi, my name's Courtney Wild. I just wanted to take a second and just have a moment of silence for all the women survivors that aren't here with us today, that passed away due to anxiety, depression, trying to keep up with this case. The only reason anyone ever found out that the government had already given Jeffrey Epstein immunity through the non-prosecution agreement was because our lawsuit forced the government to tell us. Otherwise, nobody would even know that today. Those emails provided the proof that the government worked very hard with Jeffrey Epstein to violate our rights. Why? Why did the government work so hard to protect Jeffrey and not so hard to protect me and my other innocent friends? Why was Jeffrey so important to the government, and why was I so insignificant? Why did nobody but our lawyers care before now? Why was Jeffrey Epstein so protected? Who is still being protected? And who protected them all, so the world can understand how Jeffrey was able to abuse so many of us for so long?